Emily Carter has always been passionate about teaching. At age 35, with a decade of experience in the classroom, she prided herself on being a dedicated teacher, known for her ability to connect deeply with her students. A resident of the small town of Ashford, Connecticut, Emily led a quiet and solitary life, marked by a simple routine where her hours were divided between work, her cozy home, and morning walks along the city's trails. But behind her calm appearance, Emily carried a burden. 5 years ago, she had lost her husband in a tragic car accident. Since then, Emily has closed herself off from the world, hiding her pain behind a kind smile and always helpful demeanor. Her work at school became her lifeline, the only thing keeping her going. With each new school year, Emily dedicated herself to getting to know her students individually, trying to understand their needs and help in any way possible. However, that year, one student in particular caught his attention. Lucas Bennett was a reserved boy with deep, sad eyes, always quiet at the back of the room, avoiding any type of interaction with his classmates. Although his grades were good, Lucas seemed absent, as if he were carrying an invisible weight. One morning, while correcting her students' essays, Emily noticed that Lucas hadn't turned in his. Worried, she decided to approach him after class. "Lucas, you forgot to turn in your essay. Is everything okay?" he asked, his voice soft and full of genuine concern. Lucas looked at her for a moment, as if considering whether or not he should respond. Then, almost inaudibly, he murmured, I couldn't finish. Sorry, Mrs. Carter." Emily felt there was something more behind that answer. "It's okay, Lucas. You can turn it in tomorrow. If you need more time or help, I'm here, okay?" He just nodded and left the room hurriedly, leaving his backpack behind. Later, while organizing the room, Emily noticed that Lucas's backpack was still there. Hesitantly, she picked it up, determined to return it the next day. But when he was about to put it away on his desk, something fell out of his backpack. It was a notebook, simple and worn with a faded blue cover. Upon collecting the notebook, Emily was overcome by a strange feeling, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. She hesitated for a moment but ended up opening the notebook to the first page. There he found common notes from a high school student, math formulas, story outlines, and some English assignments. However, as she quickly flipped through the pages, Emily noticed something peculiar. On the last pages of the notebook, there was a series of handwritten texts, with a hurried and anxious handwriting different from the rest. Her curiosity led her to flip through to the final page, where she found something that made her stop, her eyes wide with surprise. There, in the last lines of the notebook, was written something that she would never expect to see from a student. "I don't know how much longer I can hold out. The silence is unbearable and the pain is immense. I need someone to listen, to see what I'm feeling before it's too late." Emily's heart raced and she felt a chill run down her spine. This wasn't just an outburst, it was a cry for help. After reading those words, Emily froze for a moment, feeling a mixture of fear and responsibility. She knew she needed to do something, but at the same time, she was afraid of inappropriately invading Lucas's privacy. Tension gripped his heart, and the night that should have been peaceful was filled with thoughts of what to do next. The next day, when Lucas arrived at school, Emily called him for a private talk in the staff room. With a gentle but firm look, she placed the notebook on the table between the two of them. "Lucas, I found your notebook. I couldn't help but read the last few pages," Emily began, carefully watching the boy's reaction. Lucas immediately turned pale, his eyes widening in panic. He looked like he was about to run out of the room, but Emily's calm kept him from staying. I didn't want anyone to see that," he murmured, his voice almost breaking. "I understand," Emily replied, trying to convey all the support she felt. "But you don't have to go through this alone. Whatever's going on, I want you to know that I'm here to help." Lucas looked at her, his expression wavering between relief and fear. "I don't know how to talk about this," he admitted, hanging his head. Emily leaned in a little more, trying to meet Lucas's eyes. "Start at the beginning and go as far as you can. It doesn't have to be everything at once. Sometimes, just the fact that someone listens is enough to ease the burden." With a deep sigh, Lucas began to tell his story. Little by little, Emily discovered that he came from a dysfunctional family. His parents were in the midst of a messy divorce, marked by constant fighting and a lack of emotional support. Lucas felt invisible at home, as if no one cared what he was going through. At school, although he was not directly bullied, he felt alienated from other students, who seemed to lead very different lives from his own. Writing in the notebook was his only escape valve. He didn't know how to express his feelings to the people around him, so he put everything on paper. That cry for help on the last page was a reflection of the despair he felt at not knowing what else to do. Emily listened attentively, without interrupting him, letting him express everything that was stored inside him. When Lucas finally stopped talking, silence filled the space between them for a moment, heavy and charged with emotion. "Lucas," she began, her voice soft, "you are so brave for sharing all of this with me, and I want you to know that there are ways to overcome what you're feeling. We can find help, together." The boy just nodded, still processing the idea that someone was really there for him. Emily suggested they talk to the school counselor, a person who could offer the emotional support Lucas so desperately needed. She also promised to be by her side every step of the way, offering whatever support she could. In the days that followed, Emily noticed a small change in Lucas. Although he was still reserved, he began to open up more, not only to her, but also to the school counselor. The counseling sessions became a starting point for Lucas to begin to understand and deal with his feelings. He still wrote in his notebook, but now, his words weren't just despair. There was hope, small glimmers of light at the end of the tunnel. As Lucas began to find his way, Emily also felt something shift within her. The connection she established with the boy made her reflect on her own life and the way she had been dealing with the loss of her husband. In Lucas, she saw a part of herself, the part that had stifled its emotions and distanced itself from the world. Now, by helping the boy, Emily felt that she was, in a way, helping herself find the path to healing again. Over time, Emily and Lucas developed a bond of trust and friendship that transcended the traditional relationship between teacher and student. They began meeting regularly after school, where they discussed not only Lucas's problems, but also his hopes and dreams for the future. Lucas wanted to be a writer, drawing inspiration from the stories he had created to escape his reality. And Emily, upon hearing him, realized that perhaps it was also time for her to rewrite her own story. The months passed and spring arrived in Ashford, bringing an air of renewal to the town and its inhabitants. Lucas continued his recovery process, making progress both in therapy and in social interactions. He had gotten closer to some of his classmates, starting to build bonds of friendship that had previously seemed impossible. Emily, in turn, felt lighter, as if she was finally leaving behind the pain she had carried for so long. However, as with any healing journey, challenges still remained. One day, Lucas arrived at school visibly shaken. His eyes were red, as if he hadn't slept all night, and his face was darker than usual. Emily immediately realized something was wrong. "Lucas, did something happen?" she asked, seeing him enter the classroom with his head bowed. He hesitated, avoiding looking at her. "My mom, she wants to move away. She says we need a fresh start, but I don't want to go. Not now." Emily felt a pang of worry. The idea of Lucas being uprooted from his routine, just as he was beginning to find stability, was alarming. She knew how devastating this change could be for him, throwing him back into the emotional chaos he was trying to escape.
"Have you talked to her about how you feel?" Emily suggested, trying to be as practical as possible.
Lucas shook his head. "She doesn't listen. She just wants to get away from everything that's happening, and I don't know what to do. I don't want to leave behind everything I've achieved here. The people, you, the school, me. I'm finally starting to feel at home." Lucas's statement hit Emily deeply. She knew she needed to act, but she also understood that the situation was complicated. Convincing Lucas's mother to stay at Ashford would be difficult, but she was determined to do whatever was necessary to protect the boy's well-being. Decided, Emily asked Lucas to let her talk to her mother. Although he was reluctant, he eventually agreed, knowing that his teacher always had the best intentions. That same afternoon, Emily met with Lucas's mother, Rachel Bennett, a tired woman, her face marked by the stress of the last few years. The conversation began tensely, with Rachel defending herself against Emily's concerns. I know Lucas has been through a lot, but he needs a fresh start, and so do I. Ashford has a lot of bad memories for both of us. I just want us to have a chance to start over, Rachel explained, her voice thick with exhaustion. Emily listened intently, understanding Rachel's distress but also knowing that Lucas needed stability now more than ever. I understand what you're saying, Rachel, but Lucas is finally finding his place here. He's built important connections and is making incredible progress. I fear that a change at this point could undo all the progress he's made. Rachel looked hesitant. The idea of change was his own way of escaping his problems, an attempt to leave the emotional chaos behind and start anew. However, seeing Emily's genuine concern made her reconsider her stance. Rachel knew deep down that Lucas was doing better, and that was something she didn't want to compromise. I hadn't thought of it that way, Rachel admitted, her expression softening. But what do I do then? I don't know how to stay here. Everything reminds me of my failed marriage, the fights. It's difficult. Emily felt the pain in Rachel's words and knew that, like Lucas, she too needed help. You don't have to face this alone, Rachel. Maybe it's time to find someone you can talk to, someone who can help you deal with these memories and find a way forward without having to run away. Rachel was silent, reflecting on Emily's words. There was something comforting about knowing that she wasn't alone, that there were people willing to help her and her son. After a long moment of reflection, Rachel agreed to stay in Ashford at least for a while longer, while she sought psychological support for herself. She knew it would be difficult, but she was willing to try for Lucas's sake. When Lucas learned of his mother's decision, he couldn't hide his relief. For the first time in a long time, he felt like his voice had been heard, that he had some control over his destiny. The bond between him and Emily grew even stronger, and he began to trust her completely, knowing he could count on her unconditional support. This turning point not only strengthened Lucas's path to recovery, but also gave Emily a new perspective on her own life. As she helped Rachel and Lucas face their demons, she realized she was also exercising her own. The pain of the past was beginning to dissipate, giving way to new hope for the future. The weeks that followed were a period of transformation for everyone involved. Rachel Bennett began attending therapy sessions, something that initially seemed scary, but soon became a source of comfort and self-discovery. Meanwhile, Lucas continued his journey of emotional recovery, increasingly self-assured and more at ease with his schoolmates. The relationship between Lucas and Emily deepened even further. They began to meet regularly outside of school to discuss not only everyday problems, but also Lucas's dreams and aspirations. He began to share with Emily the stories he wrote, short stories full of imagination but also with an emotional depth that revealed the boy's maturity. "You have an incredible talent, Lucas," Emily said during one of these sessions. "These stories, and they have so much of you in them. They're intense, full of life. I think you could be a great writer one day." Lucas smiled for the first time without his usual nervousness. "Do you really think so? I always thought about being a writer, but I never imagined that anyone would like what I write. Not only do I like it, I think your words have the power to touch people just like they touched me. You should keep writing and maybe even think about publishing someday," Emily encouraged. Inspired by these words, Lucas began working on a larger project, a book. He decided he wanted to tell his own story, but in a way that blended reality and fiction, creating a universe where his feelings and experiences could be explored in a safe and creative way. While Lucas dedicated himself to his book, Emily also underwent a transformation. Being close to Lucas made her realize that it was time to face her own fears and pain. She finally decided to open her heart to the friends and family she had pushed away in recent years, recognizing that she needed support to move forward. One afternoon during one of her walks, Emily stopped in front of the cemetery where her husband was buried. It was the first time in years that she had allowed herself to visit him. With a bouquet of flowers in hand, she knelt in front of the tombstone, feeling tears run down her face. "Sorry it took so long," she whispered. "I was so scared of moving on, of forgetting you, that I ended up forgetting myself. But now, I think I'm ready to live again. And I know you would be by my side, supporting me, like you always did." At that moment, Emily felt a weight being lifted from her heart. She knew she was finally starting to heal. Meanwhile, at school, Lucas continued to flourish. His peers began to notice him more, and he began participating in activities that he had previously avoided. On one such occasion, during group work, he connected with Sarah, a classmate who, like him, enjoyed writing. They began sharing stories and ideas, forming a friendship that would soon grow into something deeper. Over time, Lucas not only excelled academically but also emotionally. He became a point of support for other colleagues who were going through difficulties, always willing to listen and help. His own experience had made him empathetic and sensitive to the pain of others, and he used this to build bonds and strengthen the community around him. Emily, observing these changes, felt a deep sense of pride. She knew that Lucas was growing into an incredible young man, and that her own growth was closely linked to his. They had started this journey together, as teacher and student, but now they were more than that. They were friends, mutual supporters, and in a way, family. Rachel Bennett, seeing the change in her son, also began to rebuild her life. With the help of therapy and support from Emily, she decided to resume her studies and pursue a new career, something she always wanted but never had the courage to pursue. The relationship between mother and son also strengthened, with Rachel opening up more to Lucas and being more present in his life. Time passed and Lucas finally finished his book. It was a sincere work where he mixed his pains, achievements, and dreams. The day he gave the manuscript to Emily, she was thrilled to see how much he had grown. "This is just the beginning, Lucas," she said, holding the manuscript proudly. "You have a bright future ahead of you." Lucas smiled, feeling more confident than ever. "And I couldn't have done it without you, Mrs. Carter. Thank you for believing in me." "I just did what anyone would do for someone they love," Emily replied, feeling a deep connection with the boy who, months ago, had seemed so lost. The last school year at the small Ashford school was coming to an end. The atmosphere was one of expectation and anxiety, with students preparing for their final exams and their long-awaited graduation. For Lucas, this moment had a special meaning. He was no longer the lonely, insecure boy who had entered school months before. Now he was about to say goodbye to that place that had become a refuge and a turning point in his life. The school was in a celebratory mood. The prom was being organized by the students themselves, and Lucas, who had always avoided these social situations, decided to actively participate in the organization, encouraged by Sarah, his friend, and now girlfriend. He undertook to write a farewell speech, something that intimidated him but also filled him with pride. While Lucas was busy giving his speech, Emily was busy with final preparations for graduation. As a teacher, she always felt a mixture of joy and sadness at this time of year. Seeing her students graduate was rewarding, but it also meant saying goodbye, something she always found difficult. On a quiet afternoon a few days before graduation, Lucas asked to meet Emily after class. When he reached the room, he was holding an envelope. "Mrs. Carter, I wanted to show you something," Lucas said, handing her the envelope. Emily opened the envelope and found an acceptance letter from the university. Lucas had been accepted into the literature course at one of the most prestigious universities in the state. "Oh, Lucas, that's amazing," Emily exclaimed, her eyes filling with tears of joy. "I'm so proud of you." "I couldn't have done it without you," Lucas replied with a shy smile. "You helped me believe in myself." The two hugged, excited. It was a moment that represented everything they had achieved together. Lucas was beginning a new phase in his life, and Emily knew he was more than prepared to face it. On the night of the prom, the school was decorated with lights and flowers, and the students, dressed in their finest attire, were full of enthusiasm. The atmosphere was celebratory, but there was also a touch of nostalgia in the air. For many, it was the last time they would be together before going their separate ways. Lucas, in a suit and tie, was nervous. His speech was ready, but he still felt the weight of responsibility to express himself in front of everyone. Sarah encouraged him, holding his hand and telling him he would do well. When it was time for Lucas to take the stage, silence took over the room. All eyes were on him, but instead of intimidated, Lucas felt strangely calm. He looked out into the audience and caught the eye of Emily, who was sitting in the front row, smiling at him proudly. "Good evening, everyone," Lucas began, his voice firm but full of emotion. "When I started this school year, I had no idea I would be here speaking to all of you. To be honest, I didn't even know if I would make it through the year. But thanks to the support of the amazing people I met here, not only did I make it, I discovered something very important: the strength of believing in yourself. Lucas paused, feeling the words flow naturally. For a long time I felt lost, as if no one could see or hear me. But it was here, at this school, that I realized I was not alone. That there are people willing to help, listen and guide. People like you, Carter, who was not only my teacher but also my friend, my mentor. She taught me that even in the darkest moments there is light we can find, within ourselves and in those around us. Emily, who was listening attentively, felt tears running down her face. This was more than a speech. It was a testament to the journey they had been on together. And today, as we graduate, I want to leave this message to all of you. No matter how difficult things may seem, there will always be a way out, a way to start over. Just believe, seek help when necessary, and never ever give up of yourself. Thank you. The hall erupted in applause. Lucas walked off the stage with a light heart, feeling truly accomplished. He had achieved more than he imagined that year. He had overcome his fears, found his voice, and was ready to move on, leaving behind the insecure boy he once was. After the speech, Emily and Lucas met once again. They exchanged a complicit look full of gratitude and affection. "You were amazing, Lucas," Emily said, hugging him. "Not as much as you," Lucas replied, smiling. "I will never forget what you did for me." "Neither do I, Lucas, and remember, I'll always be here rooting for you wherever you go." The dance continued into the night, but for Emily and Lucas, that moment marked the closing of an important chapter in their lives. They both knew they were ready to move on, taking with them the lessons and memories of what they had achieved together. The days following graduation were a time of goodbyes and new beginnings. The town of Ashford, with its easy pace and air of familiarity, seemed smaller now as the future unfolded ahead, full of possibilities. For Lucas, the move to university was exciting and scary at the same time. He was preparing to leave the city where so many things had changed in his life, but he took with him not only the memories, but also the strength he had discovered within himself. The last few weeks before departure were filled with packing, goodbyes, and that bittersweet feeling that a cycle was coming to an end. Emily, in turn, felt a mixture of pride and sadness. The journey with Lucas had been transformative not only for him, but for her as well. By helping him find his way, Emily had rediscovered her purpose. The loneliness she had felt after the loss of her husband now seemed more bearable, and she knew that despite her longing, she was ready for what the future held. The day before Lucas left, he decided to make one last visit to the school. The building was silent. Classes had already ended, and the hallways, once full of life, were now empty. Lucas walked to the classroom where he had sat in silence so many times, trying to hide his pain from the world. He stopped in front of the door, remembering how everything had changed since that day when Mrs. Carter found his notebook and decided not to ignore what was written there. Emily was in her living room tidying up the last details before leaving for summer vacation. When he heard footsteps at the door, he looked up and smiled when he saw Lucas. "I knew you'd show up," she said with a warm smile. "I needed to say goodbye," Lucas replied, entering the room. "This place means a lot to me, and you too." Emily nodded, feeling her emotions grow. "You've made incredible progress, Lucas. I'm so proud of who you've become. And I know you still have so much more to come." Lucas looked around the room, taking in every detail, as if he was keeping those memories in a special place in his mind. "I would never have made it this far without you, Mrs. Carter. I don't know how to thank you." "You already thanked me," she replied, walking over to him. "By allowing yourself to grow, by facing your fears, you've shown me that the work I do has an impact. That's the greatest reward I could ask for." They sat in silence for a moment, appreciating the connection they shared during that year. It wasn't just the relationship between teacher and student. It was something deeper, a friendship based on trust, respect, and a deep mutual understanding. "I promise I'll keep writing," Lucas said, breaking the silence. "And maybe one day you'll see my book in a bookstore." "I have no doubt about that," replied Emily with an encouraging smile. "And I'll be in line to get my autograph." They laughed together, feeling the heat of the moment. When they finally said goodbye, there was a feeling of completeness, as if they both knew that it wasn't a goodbye, but a "see you later." The next day, Lucas left for university, carrying with him not only his belongings but also the strength and lessons he had learned. Emily, in turn, began to dedicate more time to herself, rediscovering old passions and exploring new interests. She also started writing a book inspired by the experience she had with Lucas, a book about overcoming, resilience, and the importance of never giving up on yourself. Time passed, and Lucas, now a young adult, began to follow his path as a writer. He encountered challenges, as everyone does, but he always remembered Emily's words, which encouraged him to keep going, even in the most difficult times. Years later, Emily received a letter from Lucas. He was about to publish his first book and wanted her to be the first to read the manuscript. Upon opening the package, Emily found the book titled "The Secret That Changed Lives." The title made her smile, immediately recognizing the reference to the journey they shared. In the dedication, Lucas had written, "To Emily Carter, the teacher who saw more than words in a notebook, you saved my life and helped me find my way. This book is as much yours as it is mine. Thank you for everything." Emily closed the book, holding it close to her chest, feeling more grateful than ever. She knew that despite everything she had been through, her journey as a teacher and as a human being had been worth it. 5 years have passed since graduation from Ashford. The small town continued its peaceful pace, but for Lucas and Emily, life had transformed in ways they could never have imagined. Lucas, now 23, was living in New York, a vibrant city full of opportunities. His first book, The Secret That Changed Lives, became a success, receiving praise from both critics and readers. He was already working on his second book, this time exploring the complexities of human relationships with a maturity that surprised his editors. Despite the hustle and bustle of life in the big city, Lucas never forgot his roots. He was in regular contact with Emily, who always made a point of reading and commenting on every draft he sent. The conversations between them were like a reminder that, despite everything, some bonds never break. Emily, in turn, continued to teach at Ashford, but with a new energy and passion for what she did. Inspired by her experience with Lucas, she began implementing creative writing programs at school, encouraging her students to use words as a form of expression and healing. She also completed her own book, a personal account of the importance of human connection and the role an educator can play in a student's life. The book, recently published, received warm reviews, and Emily was invited to SPIO. But what really filled Emily's heart with joy was knowing that she had helped shape Lucas's future. Seeing the young man he had become, confident, talented, and determined, was proof that her work as a teacher had a profound and lasting impact. One autumn day, Lucas returned to Ashford for a surprise visit. He showed up at school unannounced, wanting to see his old teacher and friend. Upon entering Emily's office, he found her sitting at her desk, correcting papers. "Mrs. Carter," he said, a smile on his lips. Emily looked up, and when she saw Lucas, her face lit up. "Lucas, what a wonderful surprise!" They hugged each other warmly, and Lucas looked around the room, remembering how that place had been a safe haven for him. "I needed to come back here, where it all started," he said, his eyes shining with emotion. "It's always good to see you, Lucas. Sit down, tell me everything," Emily replied, pulling out a chair for him. They spent hours talking, reminiscing about the past and sharing plans for the future. Lucas spoke about his new book, the people he met, and the experiences he had. Emily talked about new projects at the school, about how she was helping more students find their own voices. Before leaving, Lucas took a signed copy of his new book out of his bag and handed it to Emily. "I wanted you to have the first copy," he said. Emily accepted the gift with a smile. "I will cherish this with all the love in the world, and know that wherever you go, I will always be rooting for you." As he left the school, Lucas looked back, feeling a wave of gratitude. He knew that Ashford, and especially Emily, would always have a special place in his heart. And as he walked back to the car, he thought of the words she always said, "Never give up on yourself." Lucas smiled. He didn't give up, and thanks to that, he was living the dream that once seemed so distant. And he knew that with Emily by his side, there was no limit to what he could achieve.